else is coming up and speaking right after you. First thing I want to say to you is thank you. Thank you. I'm sure you realize this sort of in principle, but I want you to think about this. This ministry would not exist without you. I mean, it would go seriously bankrupt fast if you went on strike. Sign that process donations. And the United States represents more than 50% of the total income of this ministry worldwide, way more than 50%, and most of that is donations. So guess what? You're doing something really important. And all these stories that you hear about what's going on, there isn't one of them that go on, at least in the United States anyway, if it hadn't been for what you did. And I'd like to make that a little more personal too. I've raised my support for 50 years almost. So I'm here because of you, and I just want you to know I'm grateful to you. Thank you. Anytime you see a donation designated to Judy and me, please handle it with care. Let me pray as we begin. Father, thank you so much for this time together. Just my joy to be with my friends here, my co-workers. Together we serve you. And I thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Just one other preliminary thing. I've been suffering from a tickle cough for the last week or so. So if I go out of commission for just 10 or 20 seconds, don't worry, I haven't died yet. Maybe somebody up here knows CPR if I really want to. But I just wanted you to be warned ahead of time. And I have some liquid over there that'd be helpful to me if I get in that spot. Last night, my brother, Brad, was over at our house, just Judy and me and Brad. And we were having dinner together, and in the course of the conversation, I shared with him an opportunity that I had to minister to a woman on a plane just last Friday. Now, I'd been in Korea, so I'd flown back to Atlanta, and then this last leg of that trip was from Atlanta down here to Orlando. Now, it was, I think I left at like 10 o'clock in Atlanta. So what's my number one problem? You know, staying awake. And I thought, what am I going to do? I might even resort to watching something on the screen that they, over there. I hardly ever do that because I got so many things to do. But I didn't get a chance to do that. Because this woman sitting next to me, Judy, by the way, is over here just to my right across the aisle, and this woman's son, I found out, was just to the right of Judy. But this woman sitting next to me engaged me in a conversation. I'd like to take credit, but she was pretty hard not to talk to. Ever been around somebody like that? And we got to, her name was Kim, by the way, and we got to talking and different things I didn't let on that I was a Christian, let alone in Christian work, for a while anyway, and just listening to her, and found out in the course of things that she came from a sort of a basically Christian background, but wasn't doing a lot with it. By the way, this seems a little hot. Can we turn down the volume just a notch?
What number is that?
Number 8. I didn't mean that it was burning my hand. You know what I was talking about. That's. Can you still hear me okay? Yeah, good. And so I learned a little about the fact that she was sympathetic to the Christian faith, but really wasn't practicing it and didn't see it as practical even. Well, at some point along the line, I started to minister, and we got to talking about some of the challenges that she faced in life. The son that she had just on the other side of Judy had just been at a camp, actually a Christian camp up in North Carolina, and she was pleased about that, even though that wasn't necessarily strongly her persuasion. Well, in the course of the whole time, which was an hour, I didn't have any trouble staying awake. I was very engaged in the conversation. And toward the end, as we landed finally on the runway in Orlando, and I realized we probably only had about 5 more minutes, however long it would take to taxi to the gate, I said, Kim, would you mind if I pray for you? She just kind of touched her heart like this and said, oh, that would be great. And so I prayed with her. And when I lifted my eyes from the prayer, she was crying. And she reached over and grabbed my hand. Now, I'm pointing out to you, Judy's right over there. I would be a little more careful with that. And she said, thank you so very much for what you shared. Well, after I shared that story with my brother Brad, he said, I could never do that. I could never do that. I said, well, actually, you could. And what I'm going to share with you is a little bit of what I shared with him to say to you, you may think because you're in the back room here or someplace, this operation, because you're just opening donations. That's not how I feel about it, but you might think that way. That somehow you're not able to be on the front lines, and I want to cause you to stop thinking that way. You have a different part of the front lines that you represent. And I'm not talking anymore about what you do primarily in the office, but as you're out and about living your life. But you are on the front lines of God's work. And you don't need to leave it to people like me or Steve Zellers or people all over the United States and the world to do all the ministering. You can get in on the fun. Don't you think that was kind of moving to me? To have someone crying after I had a chance to share with you and pray with you. Why is it that we think we can't do it? That's what Brad said. I can't do that. I think it's this reason. When I say someone ministered to someone, or what is a ministry situation, what comes to mind? And I once had a group discuss this. We don't have quite so many minutes this morning, and I found out most all of them thought of like church, pastor preaching, or some more formal kind of teaching situation, that's ministry. It involves content and delivery in a more formal sense. Well, that is ministry. I'm not going to take anything away from that. But that's probably not the majority of ministry that goes on in people's lives. The majority is very personal. So let me ask you kind of another question. If I were to ask you, recount a situation, if you would, where someone ministered to you and you thought about that a little bit and you started thinking about those situations, just the way I asked the question, someone ministered to you, you probably wouldn't think of a church setting with pastor preaching. Again, it's good, but you probably think of sitting over a cup of coffee, sharing a need that you had, and someone really blessed you by, well, maybe just listening, but also maybe by giving you an encouraging word or praying for you. See, that's all ministry too. So part of what I want to do is redefine your concept here, because one of the things that people think of when they think particularly of witnessing, but I think almost any ministry is fear. I listened to a pastor just a month ago sharing, and he said, I have listened to pastors more often than that, but he said, you know what the three biggest problems are about witnessing for the average Christian? Fear, fear, and fear. I said, that's really true. That's really true. Just my brother saying, I can't do that. I'd be afraid to inaugurate a conversation. Because we think of it as content, and we think of it as something more professional in terms of delivery, as opposed to more normal, life to life. And what I want to share with you is, there have been many opportunities you have had probably, if you thought about it, where you've ministered to people, and you probably have a lot more if you do a couple of things, maybe just a shade better, and that's what I'm going to spend the rest of my time on. What could you do to make yourself more effective in ministering to others? And don't limit yourself to evangelism when I'm saying this. I mean, just touching the lives of other people. The first point is to be approachable. To be approachable. I was in a conversation with a guy who was here on our property. He had flown into town. He was really upset about something we hadn't done, in his opinion. I think he was wrong, but nonetheless, I mean, he was hot. I'm not talking like the mic here. I mean, he was just... There was no even interjecting a thought or two, you know. I mean, he was, and he was harsh in his judgment. You guys are wrong. Somebody lied to me. So again, I don't think it occurred, but well, that's unapproachable. I heard, as I learned more about this particular guy, that is his style. He's very unapproachable. Wouldn't be the kind of guy you kind of consider warm and fuzzy and wrap your arm around, you know. You want to have your arm back anyway. I'll contrast that with, I don't know how many of you know John Rogers. I mean, he just defines approachability. You can't get along with John Rogers, you have a problem, okay? I'm not talking content of the conversation, I'm just saying as a person. Or, I'll give you the other example, just call your attention to what happened there with Kim. She apparently thought I was approachable, because she certainly did the approaching, okay, and talking. And so there are things you can do. I don't have time to really unpack this a little, but if you just look at 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 to 8, you'll get some ideas about being kind and patient and things like that. And just think, is there anything I can do to improve my approachability? Because that will greatly enhance the likelihood I'll get into one of those one-on-one ministry situations. The second is to pray for opportunities. You see, sometimes, since we aren't thinking we're qualified, we don't even venture to pray that God would send something, because that would incur the thing you didn't want. Right? You pray for what you don't want. But pray that God will let you in a day touch a life. Do you know that is my prayer every single day? And rarely do I not even see where I had the opportunity to touch not only one life, but a lot of times several lives. So just pray. God will send you opportunities within range for you in terms of people you feel comfortable talking with and things like that. Of course, you got to look for them after you pray for it, but that's a very good process. Let me give you an example where the answer was a little quicker than I normally would expect. I told you every day I pray, God, help me to touch a life today. And I was in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. How many of you have ever been to Sioux Falls, South Dakota? There you go. Well, it exists. Okay. It's in the Siberian region of the United States. I grew up in almost the same far north. Anyway, I was there, and I was staying in a hotel, and I had to get to the airport. And I got up, and I had my devotions, and I prayed the prayer, God, help me touch a life today. And I thought, boy, I got just enough time to go by the club room there, which was on the same floor that I was, and get just a bite to eat. So it was 6:30. I happen to remember, because the club room opened at 6:30. So I rushed down. It was just right down from my room, left my bags in the room, and knocked on the door. And sure enough, Mindy came to the door and opened it. And I was the first person there in the club room. And so I got my food, and I thought, well, it's pretty hard to miss an opportunity here. I mean, there's just the two of us right now. There'll probably be more coming in the next 10, 15 minutes. But so we struck up a conversation. In this case, I took the initiative of the conversation. Found out this about Mindy, that this was her second job. She actually had a full-time job during the week. And I said, wow, that's pretty stretching, isn't it? I mean, to have a full-time job during the week, and you do this on Saturday and Sunday at 6:30 in the morning. I said, what's the deal? And she basically said, in a little kinder words than I'm already saying, she had a deadbeat former husband, and she's got kids she's raising, and she's got to have money to do that. And there were many other tough spots in her life, and it didn't take a genius to figure out that I could at least pray for her, because she had a lot of needs. So I said, again, looking at my watch, I said, Mindy, I got to run. I'm going to go down to my room, get a book that I'd like to leave you with. But before I leave you right now, could we pray? And we prayed. And once again, when I lifted my eyes, she was crying. Now, what is it, gals? Help me out here. So I rushed into my room, got the book, gave it to her. And as I was heading to the airport, I was thinking, wow, who would have expected an answer prayer 5 minutes after I prayed the prayer? God opened the room just in time with Mindy. Nobody else there at that moment. You just pray. Let God supply the opportunities. You can relax. Just take advantage of the ones that come your way. I find that's a little overwhelming some days. From here, I'd like to start with an example, but I'm going to end up making 3 main points, one of which has 2 subpoints. Now, I'm sorry for being so formal about it, but if you hang in with the illustration, the points will be easy to follow, okay? So that's, I have more to say, and you're going to think I've drifted, but I haven't drifted. I'm setting you up, okay? In a good way. I was on my way to Chicago from Ontario, California, United flight, and a woman across the aisle from me, I got to know a little bit. Her name was Joanne. I didn't know her before. And we got in the conversation. I said, Joanne, where are you going after you landed in O'Hare? Thinking she was flying somewhere else. It's a United hub. She said, no, I'm not flying elsewhere. I'm going to my hometown. I said, really? Where was that? Where is that? She said, Rockford, Illinois. I said, you have got to be kidding me. That's my hometown. I mean, what are the odds? Well, there are no odds in God's kingdom, okay, right? He sat me on that seat next to her. So we got talking. I'd been at her dad's furniture store on East State Street. I mean, go figure. We knew people in common. We were roughly the same age in high school, even though we didn't go to the same high school. But I knew a lot of people that went to East High School where she went. And let me just say we were old friends within 10 minutes, probably. Well, then in the course of the conversation, she shared that she'd just gotten a divorce and was raising several small kids by herself. And I thought, wow. Can't be easy. I mean, I just thought that to myself. Some time passed. I didn't say anything right at the time, but I eventually came around to that, and I said, wow, Joanne, that must have been tough to get divorced. She said, yeah, it really was. I said, well, I've never gone through a divorce, but I've definitely had plenty of sources of serious heartburn, with anxiety in my life. Would you be interested in hearing how I've learned to deal with those things? Because it really works, what I've found. Well, what you going to say to an old friend from Rockford? Sure, tell me about it, Well, I gave my testimony, which ends with a very powerful illustration of God giving peace in spite of a bad circumstance. And at the end of that, here was how I transitioned to the gospel. I said, Joanne, have you ever experienced a relationship with God like that? She said, no, I had no idea you could experience a relationship with God that gave you peace like that. And then I said, Joanne, I don't mean to impose or anything, but would you be interested in hearing how you could? And here's what she said. Now, mind you, we're setting up a witnessing opportunity here. You know what you think of when I say witnessing. Would you be willing to share that with me? Well, okay, if you insist. She was on the other foot here. All of a sudden, she wants to hear. She doesn't know yet that it's gospel, but she wants to hear the gospel. Well, I want to go back in that story and make 3 points. One with 2 subpoints, like I promised before. Okay? First point, in terms of how it is you engage in that conversation I'm talking about to minister, you listen. It's not an accident God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, okay? Take a lesson from math. Probably ought to listen twice as much as you talk, okay? And what's neat about listening, in addition to that in and of itself, builds up a willingness of people to listen to what you have to say. But it also gives you lots of knowledge of what's going on, right? How did I learn she was from Rockford? Well, I asked her a question. How did I learn that she'd gone through a divorce? Well, I just kept asking her questions, and then how did I learn how she felt about that? I asked a question. I was listening. Mainly, I asked a few questions, but I was mainly listening. And then what I was doing was connecting. So listen and connect. So when I said I'm from Rockford, that's a point of connection of common ground. So that's the first of the subpoints there. You connect by finding common ground. Why? Because the more we have in common, the more likely you are to trust me in whatever I might want to say. Oh, I can identify with that. Oh, you're from Rockford, Illinois. Well, wow. Or you're an engineer. I happen to be an engineer. Or whatever it is you might have that would be common ground to the person, that builds trust even in one conversation, let alone if it's over a period of time. Every time you can say, I identify with that, you've just notched up the possibility that they will approach you and be open to what you have to say. So you're connecting by finding common ground, which builds trust. The second point of connection, just keep it simple, I'm going to make another C, okay, is find the crack in the person's life. What is it that's bothering them so much that they would be willing to listen even to something that's a little not what they expected? Maybe they didn't expect the gospel, but all they know is they got a need. And if a person they learned to trust at least a little bit anyway found that this met their need, they're willing to listen. So I'm looking for 2 things as I'm connecting. One is common ground, and the other is the crack where I can say, Joanne, I'm not going through a divorce, but I have gone through many anxieties. Would you be interested in hearing how I've learned to deal with that? And what's the last point? Help. See, one of the problems you're perceiving, and actually it's valid, is if a person sees you coming in for a landing to convert is your main motive I'm talking about now, that isn't helping you. Now, some people are so ready to receive Christ, don't worry, they're going to pray anyway maybe. But they're going to be a lot more open if you're coming in from an angle of help. Who is it here, raise your hands, that doesn't ever want help? If you did raise your hand, I'm going to send somebody to you to help you, whether you know you need it or not. Of course, we all love to be helped. And so when I said, Joanne, I don't want to impose, but would you be interested in hearing how? What was I offering? Help. In a topic of her great interest, and on which topic I had actually seen Jesus Christ make a difference in my life. Do you see the match there? If I can match Christ delivering in my life with a need in their life, man, this is getting seriously easy at that point. And particularly today, where people aren't quite so cerebral in how they think about things. The first question they got is, did this work for you? And I've answered that question. Well, yeah, it actually worked quite well. So what I'm saying to you is, if you, generally speaking, are approachable, and if you pray for opportunities, and I know God will answer that prayer, and if you just listen and connect and come in from the approach of help, I think you're going to discover you're going to have almost more than you can handle. you're going to turn into, if you aren't already, a seriously ministering Christian. And it starts from understanding what that really means. Not that you're a seminary grad, okay, or you're going to exegete the Greek. But you can certainly exegete your life. Certainly can identify with their lives. And I think if you do this, you're going to be amazed at how God will send along opportunities. And I'll just close with an example of that. I was on another flight. You're going to think all I do is fly. In this case, it was a long flight. It's back from Korea, not this recent trip, but another trip. And my sister was sitting across the aisle from me, and we were talking, and it's in the middle of the night, I guess, someplace wherever along the trip we were. And we were talking about what it means to be a missional Christian, which is a pretty strong topic. And I didn't particularly think anybody was awake around us. You know, we weren't trying to be too loud, but I was across the aisle. And I'll bet we talked 20 minutes before this occurred, maybe even 30. And all of a sudden, the guy sitting right behind my assistant stood up and took a step sort of in between us, the two of us. And he said, "I'm a Christian, but I'm really backslidden." That was his word for it. Must have been a Baptist or something. Okay, I'm really backslidden. And he said, "Could you help me?" I thought to myself, I can't even have a private conversation. Somebody just intrudes to be ministered to. My point is simple. You start praying that prayer, you begin to get pretty good at this in a good way that I mean that, and you will discover God will send people your way because he knows you're ready and you're looking. And that would be my prayer for you. Let me pray. Father, I do pray that for every person in this room. They continue to do the excellent job they do at opening mail and doing other things that would be represented around this room. But on top of that, that when they get the opportunities, sometimes with non-Christians, sometimes with Christians, that they will take advantage of them in your power. Pray for those opportunities from you, trust in you, but also with a little bit of knowledge of what the process is often like. That as they listen, they will be able to connect. And that connection will involve a lot of common ground. And then it will involve finding things that people want to talk about because it's a need in their life. And as we sense those needs and we meet them, we are indeed ministering to a person. Thank you, Father, that every single one of us, in that sense of the word, can be a minister.